Well, sorry for the poor lighting tonight. Um, I'm in a little bit of a hurry because um, probably shouldn't mention this. I'll be using this video next week, next year, but I'll be leaving tomorrow, Tuesday morning for Panama for a Caribbean Lit conference, and I'll share a bunch of the things with you. I've been to about 5 of the different islands in the Caribbean, so I'll show you all the blog pages so you can see what it's like in Trinidad and Cuba, Havana. Anyway, this week's reading, I'll only make a brief one. I have your quiz ready for week 4, and I'll make another video for that probably tomorrow morning. Anyway, everything will be up before I leave. Now, week 5, you'll take your midterm examination. There is some material up there for that, but as I've changed quite a lot the reading, I'll have to make a new video for that midterm exam. In the brief, the midterm, and I'll try Sunday or Monday of next week. The exam will run from Wednesday until Monday to make another video even before then, perhaps while I'm in Panama, to set you up for things. But basically, the exam comes in 2 parts. Part 1, I'll give you a list of prompts. It could be a quotation, it could be a question about something that happens in a story. And then you'll write 7 or 8 sentences on the significance of that comment. It might be something like Abu Bey saying he weighed her beauty to determine the dowry. Those kinds of lines that you can write a nice paragraph about women's rights, gender issues, things along those lines. And I'll give you a list of about 20. And you'll write on 5. Elsewhere, it'll say 6 in places because I have done that in the past. But given the new reading list and things like that, I think 5 will be enough. Now, the second part will ask that you write an essay over Persepolis or Harp of Burma. And I'll give you basically the outline for that. And tell you what the questions are so that you can think about them. Now, part 1 of the exam you have to complete in one sitting, so that those 5 prompts will come up. And my suggestion is that you write out on a Word document all the prompts, and that you put the prompts on the computer and save a copy for yourself. If anything goes wrong, I can't just reopen the exam that you were working on. Blackboard doesn't allow me to do that. But since all these prompts are in a pool, you're liable to get, 3 out of 5 new ones. So you can back that up and have it to send me, or to cut and paste in there and tell me which one you are answering, and we'll be in good shape. Now, part 2, you can go back and forth to from as many times as you want during the allotted time, Wednesday through Monday, for you to take the exam, okay? And there'll be a quiz this week. I think it's 21 questions, and I worked on that today. So you'll have that video up and running, and your usual from Thursday morning until Sunday at midnight to complete that. And I'll have more to say about the midterms. So I want you to be able to complete Harp of Burma, and which is your job for this week at any rate. Now, I won't maybe making a video about Harp of Burma because you don't need one. For this second novel. There are extensive notes, but do watch things like what turns our corporal into a Burmese monk. And you'll see as it goes along, there's even some humor as when he falls in with the cannibals, testing the fat on him to see what he's doing. But there, probably don't want to ask where the monks' clothing and stuff came from that they have there, since I guess open season on food. But at any rate, he does complete a heroic endeavor. He will um, change, and that metamorphosis is interesting, and you won't hear about it until the end, when the Japanese are going to go back home to rebuild Japan, and the monk gives a letter, and everybody, they realize that this guy they've been seeing all along is actually the corporal who's now turned into. He's not the man he was before. But note too that for him, it's all a sacrifice. If he didn't want to go home, it would cause no problems for him. But the one thing he wants more than anything, he has to give up on his new mission. And he learns from the British too, that they honor their dead. And so he shows up in the parade with that beautiful, beautiful ruby that he finds. So you'll eventually, I mean, it's the company coming together, singing again, all those different things. But sort of the spark that had him going was the corporal, and he will not. Well, you can read then. He's going to stay. And you can read the reasons, and he learns from the British for that one, and it's almost like he hears a voice telling him what to do. It's a very moving novel about the future of Japan, and you want to pay attention to those kinds of ideas about what kind of Japan there will be in the future. And like that sergeant, he's kind of the grist. He just goes back and starts working and doesn't, he never stops. He's the only guy who can't sing in the company. But now there is a very, very beautiful movie about based upon this novel, and if you get a chance to look at it, oh, do by all means, because I'm sure you'll like it. Changes some things. Movies are not novels and whatnot, but chart the course. Chart the course, the course of the corporal's transformation, and the role that music plays. It's just a beautiful, beautiful novel, and quick read. And like I say, you have lots of notes. Now, I'm not going to go through every piece here in great detail. You'll see that there are notes for a lot of things that you're not required to read this week, and that's because I'm reformulating the class, putting the focus on specific things, and cutting out, as much as I hated to do some of the literature. You're going to have now some works, 6 of them, from India and Japan. You're going to have 2 short stories from India and 1 poem, and 1 poem from Japan, and 2 short stories. Quite different from what you'll read from India. Now, Amrita Pritam is the name of the author, and she has a poem there. And you should look at the notes for it. I mean, she compares the whole creative process to the burning of a cigarette, which might not be good for you. I don't think that's what the poem's about necessarily. But look at the notes there and pay particular attention to the beautiful little story on the internet called Wildflower. Being part of these stories like Fall, My Mother, Wildflower, and certainly Spring Storm, to lesser degree Patriotism, of course, deal with those kind of gender issues, and this contrast between tradition and modernism, so central to the literature that we're reading. You'll learn about the culture, but also a lot of these writers are taking a stand, political stand, that maybe we're not used to reading about so vehemently, if you will, in a lot of Western literature. And Achebe himself has gone after these people to say that that's a luxury you have in the West. But in Africa and places like we're reading now, there is an urgency, and literature has a decided role to show that the emperor doesn't have clothes, if you like. Wildflower is a sweet story, maybe depressing in some ways. The girl is from the urban area, raised very strictly, not unlike, let's say, Samia would be, I mean, kept innocent. And an old man's wife dies, and someone gives him a cloth, a towel, and basically says, "This is to dry your tears." And what it is that the girl in Wildflower will marry that man after she reaches puberty. And read how that what goes on in there. I mean, she's a delightful little girl, and there's a woman older who's basically the narrator, and here we have a lot of things going on. She wants to learn to write her name at the end of the story and think about the significance there, and the notes will help you. But um, there is the conservative side in the rural area about the wife's role or a woman's role, and then you have the role of romantic love, which is probably antithetical to a lot of the more communal societies where the emphasis falls upon community and not individual desires. And here you see is sort of the radicalness of what romantic love um, uh, requires or demands, because romantic love is very, very selfish. It's I love. The emphasis falls on the individual as opposed to the community, or in the case of the young lady in Wildflower, the strict social strictures that say what her place is and what should go on. Love is not an essential element of many arranged marriages. Um, it's not to say that there isn't any, it often is the case, but it's economics, it's family, it's all those other things that are put above what we see as an essential um, in any marriage. So read there. Now, Fall My Mother is is a coming of age story by Ambia, Ambai, maybe isn't her name, and watch that one too. Is another of a young girl coming of age in India, and here you see that watch how the parents treat this young girl until her first menstrual uh, um, cycle, because then she's no longer a little girl. I mean, she has no idea what's happening to her, but she's talking about her mother and the changed relationships that happen when she becomes marriageable. But she's kept innocent about everything, and everything is lovey-dovey. And see what happens when, in fact, bang. She then becomes a commodity, basically, much like Samia, overnight. Told, well, now you have to do things this way, you have to do them that way, and there's also the marketability. With on the marriage market, darker skin is not good. And this was before white people came to India. The Brahmins were always seen as lighter skinned, and this is in the caste system. So if you have lighter skin, it was always that you were better, and more blessed, whatever. So while you're reading the story, pay attention to those details of the shift, overnight shift. You want to see the world turned upside down kind of motif. It's when the young girl in the story finds suddenly that she's no longer what she was before. And now the whole thing is based upon how we're going to get rid of her. Well, it might be a little harsh, but the problems in finding her a spouse, which is now big on the minds of the parents. We moved to Japan, and we have the Mike Taku. Yes, I like this poem, Genealogy. It's also about the role of tradition and how someone, the idea of bringing a new child into the world, and you get the feeling, and when you read the story, that the narrator, the protagonist, just works himself to the bone, and following in these strong traditions that preceded, and you see that it turns into a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, um, but doesn't say that all traditions are bad. And I don't think any uh, anything you read will do that. But Patriotism by Yukio Mishima comes pretty close. I mean, Mishima himself was a controversial figure, tried to kill himself the way that the couple does, basically, especially the husband in Harikari. But there's another word for it that's escaping my mind. But he did try to do that, and he botched it. He was a controversial figure. He looked to the samurai warrior caste as an ideal for Japan, while he himself was a homosexual. He claimed to hate everything Western and built his house very much in the Western thing. He was a brilliant guy who if things had worked a little differently, would probably have won a Nobel Prize for literature. And Patriotism, which is about suicide, um, is marvelous in its presentation of the making the actual slitting of the belly tied with a very romantic kind of erotic happening over overtone. It's divided into parts, and you have notes. So, I mean, Mishima even pretended apparently to have tuberculosis so he could get out of the war. Is a very conflicted man. He even starred in the movie that was based basically on patriotism, and then, as I say, in the end, botched his own suicide. Very, very what we would call right wing. And after the war in Japan, the emperor was kept. It was kept because the emperor, the idea was I can't remember the name of the famous anthropologist that sort of argued for keeping the emperor, but MacArthur and company decided to keep him because they thought it would be good for the Japanese to still have this religious center, and for other various reasons. And so the fiction came out that this emperor had nothing to do really with the war. It was all the Japanese politicians. Well, in fact, the emperor was up to here in the war effort. But then again, he was forced to speak. He did at the surrender. No one had heard his voice before in the public. I mean, he was revered. It was the sun. He was a god, and one of the longest ruling monarchies in the world. Is still there, but with much, 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 much reduced political power. And the religious connection has been dampened a lot. Now, Mishima hated what MacArthur and company did, the new Constitution, and he wanted to revive all those things that basically, in many respects, your novel is against. They said we shouldn't have sung all those patriotic songs. Maybe we wouldn't be here. Whereas Mishima hates the new Japanese constitution. He hates the idea that the army can't be superior and these kinds of things. And he looks to the past that Harper Burma questions. And in the story, patriotism is based on something that really happened around the time of World War I. Not World War II, but the idea here is, I moved up a bit, that the lieutenant who's only been married for, less than 6 months is seen as this great ideal with his wife, who readily commits suicide with him, as being examples of the purity of life to which Mishima points in this story, is that the lieutenant is not just mortified because he's going to have to fight against his own friends who are involved in this conspiracy, but also the whole idea that the imperial forces would be fighting each other. This is really the big thing there, because everything should be for the emperor, even sex. When you're reading about it, the whole idea is everything is done as a conduit to the emperor, who is the sun god, and so is the husband in its own kind of way. As I said, there's a subservience there that the wife is supposed to just, without question, and so she is a great model. Even the way they lay themselves out with all the blood and in a certain way and everything is kind of and that picture of their marriage and to show that they were just uh, um, supporters, if you will, of the emperor. I mean, everything is done just right. It's a marvelous read and a terrifying in many ways story. Now, Spring Storm is short, um, but the author Yoko Moriyoko does a good job with the gender divisions, and also the idea of the woman who's very shy, but when she gets in front of a camera, is able to express her inner self, her true self, if you will, but which she's not allowed to do in society. And you can tell from the very beginning that she knows what's going to happen when she tells her husband of her huge success. I mean, she smokes standing up. She's nervous. I love that the elevator doesn't work, this kind of upward mobility. And then she talks to her husband, who basically she lies to him. And it's sort of not unlike, well, the outcome's a lot different. Getting a divorce is nothing like what Tears does to her husband, but she gives him every chance to just show a little kindness to the children. And all he's doing is sitting in the backyard with a six-pack, thinking that he's really pissing Peter off because, hey, I got yours, big guy, that kind of thing. Well, this is a little more subtle, but it's obvious that as with Tears, she hopes that he'll do something right. But, I mean, here she is sharpening the knife. It's obvious that she, in the back of her mind at least, knows the truth, that this is not going to work. Well, it's sort of like that in Spring Storm, where the husband demands, in a way that's reflected in Japanese society, that he would be the first one so that he could be the leader of the family. Well, it's not working that way. So pay attention. I love his examples. They're all drawn from American cinema. And you would expect, in many respects, we think of, Hollywood as being incredibly progressive, activists, left wing. But here, and maybe they do a lot like that in Japan, but the opposite is what's going on here, except for her. That gives the being in a movie and whatnot gives her an opportunity to elevate herself, and to be very successful in society. Whereas he's a screenwriter and whatnot and says, no, it won't work. Just won't work. Which is kind of sad. So she'll lie to him first, and I like that Spring Storm. It's like the tea that's getting ready. The kettle's ready to go off, and I don't know that the Spring Storm here is it could be a motif of change, of rebirth, and whatnot. But it does show that these kinds of struggles have a human cost. And I think that's one of the really good things about a story like this and others that we've read that center on family. Um, and so that there's this emotional pull that brings us into the story. Same with Fall, same in its own way with Patriotism, Two Young Lovers, and clearly with the other story that we have to read, Wildflower, is young love and things along those lines. So enjoy the stories. I'll have a video for you for the quiz, and I'll get something going for you before too long about the midterm exam, and I will be in internet touch in while I'm in Panama. I did finish all the. It makes me laugh about I'll put them back in tomorrow. The grades for the last week's discussion thread did not. I noticed just a little while ago did not take, but I have it all recorded, so I'll get caught up in everything. Do a good job on your quizzes and get me your papers now. November 10 is today, and I'll start reading them over the next week. So enjoy your week. Have a productive one.